In February 1945, during the chaotic German retreat toward the Rhine, an internal memorandum circulated among the senior staff of the 6th SS Panzer Army. It was a document born out of pure frustration. For years, German defensive doctrine had relied on a simple principle: hit the enemy, force them to deploy their infantry, bleed them dry, and then counterattack. But against the columns of the U.S. Third Army, this system completely collapsed. The memorandum noted a terrifying tactical pattern. The enemy does not engage our strong points. They do not wait for heavy artillery to clear a path. Their armored reconnaissance units identify our flanks, and before our local commanders can organize a counter-thrust, American armor is already 10 miles in our rear, cutting off our supply lines. It is not an assault. It is a rapid encirclement carried out at 30 miles an hour. This was the reality of fighting an army that had completely abandoned traditional Western European pacing. While other Allied formations moved with cautious, methodical precision, the Third Army operated on a singular, aggressive premise: speed is the best form of protection. And to the battle-hardened officers of the SS, who had spent years fighting static or slow-moving fronts, this relentless velocity felt less like a military operation and more like a systematic execution of their entire defensive strategy. To truly understand the profound psychological impact of this strategy on the German High Command, one must look closely at how the Third Army structured its relentless advance. They did not move in massive, slow infantry squares. Instead, they utilized highly specialized mechanized columns led by cavalry reconnaissance groups. These were not lightly armed scouts meant to watch from a distance and report back to headquarters. These were heavily armed, fast-moving killer teams consisting of M8 Greyhound armored cars, light Stuart tanks, and seasoned infantry riding in armored half-tracks. When these elite reconnaissance units encountered an established German defensive line or a hidden anti-tank nest, they did not stop to dig trenches or wait for manual orders. They engaged immediately, utilizing a highly aggressive technique known as reconnaissance by fire. Instead of sending scouts on foot, they would flood the dense woodlines, high ridge lines, and village outskirts with a massive wall of machine gun and automatic cannon fire. This deliberate violence forced the hidden German defenders to panic and reveal their positions by firing back prematurely. If the local resistance proved too heavy, or if they ran into concrete pillboxes, the American column did not launch a costly, time-consuming frontal assault. They simply noted the exact GPS coordinates, radioed in specialized fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt, found a secondary dirt road or a farm path around the position, and kept driving forward. For the German infantry and fanatical SS units holding the line, this unconventional method created a terrifying and profound sense of absolute isolation. An SS battalion commander operating near the town of Prüm described this exact experience in an intercepted emergency radio transmission to his division headquarters. "We held our sector perfectly. We repelled their initial armored probe with heavy losses, but within 2 short hours, the firing completely died down, and we realized the Americans had simply ignored our existence. They did not fight us. They are already 5 kilometers behind our lines, attacking our regiment's ammunition dump and heavy artillery positions. We are holding a line that no longer protects anything." This aggressive operational philosophy was put to its most critical and historic test during the legendary relief of Bastogne in December 1944. While the brutal encirclement of the 101st Airborne Division is traditionally viewed by historians as a static, desperate siege story, the dramatic arrival of the Third Army transformed the battlefield into an unprecedented demonstration of raw logistical mobility and willpower. The German General Staff had mathematically calculated that the Allied forces in the south were too deeply committed to their own bloody offensive operations to respond effectively to the sudden Ardennes breakthrough. They believed they had at least a week to crush the American paratroopers before any relief could materialize. But they completely miscalculated the nature of Patton's command structure. The Third Army performed an unprecedented, nearly impossible operational maneuver. They successfully disengaged entire combat divisions from active, heavy fighting in the Saar region, completely pivoted their axis of advance 90 degrees dead north, and began moving through blinding winter storms along narrow, icy mountain roads. This was not a managed, orderly march. It was a desperate race against time. When the lead elements of the famous 4th Armored Division finally slammed into the southern German ring surrounding Bastogne, they did so with such violent momentum and heavy firepower that the surrounding SS and Fallschirmjäger units were caught completely unprepared. They expected a slow, methodical American approach, preceded by long artillery preparation. Instead, they got a direct, blunt hammer blow. An internal after-action report from the 5th Parachute Division, which was actively supporting the SS siege forces, noted the pure shock of that sudden impact. The American armored thrust did not behave like any standard relief column we have studied. They did not deploy systematically across the fields to clear the roads or secure their flanks. They formed an incredibly narrow, dense spearhead of heavy tanks and armored infantry and simply punched through our defensive lines at maximum speed. They accepted high casualties, but never once slowed down their engines. Their terrifying arrival shattered our defensive perimeter before our local commanders could even coordinate our anti-tank assets or deploy reserves. By March of 1945, as the unstoppable Third Army advanced deep into the strategic Palatinate region, the fundamental structural weakness of the German army became its ultimate undoing. Despite the propaganda surrounding their advanced Tiger and Panther tanks, the vast majority of the German army's supply lines still relied heavily on horse-drawn transport. Against a fully motorized, highly industrialized opponent, this disparity proved fatal. SS units, despite their fanatical ideology and willingness to die for the Reich, found themselves physically unable to outrun, outmaneuver, or escape the American mechanized columns. In personal letters and journals captured from retreating German soldiers during this period, the recurring theme of absolute technological and velocity dominance is constant and overwhelming. An articulate SS Panzer Grenadier officer wrote a vivid description in a letter that was found in his pocket after his capture. "We spend the entire miserable day marching through knee-deep mud, completely exhausting our men and our few remaining horses just to move a pathetic 10 kilometers. When we finally reach our designated defensive line, cold and out of ammunition, we find that the Americans have already arrived there hours ago by truck. They are waiting for us in the villages, rested, warm, with their vehicle engines still running. You cannot fight an enemy that moves 3 times faster than you can physically walk." This relentless, non-stop pressure completely prevented the German High Command from establishing any coherent, stable front line. The moment a new defensive position was carefully drawn on a map by senior staff in Berlin, it was already completely obsolete on the ground. The Third Army's armor ran so far ahead of any official Allied schedule that they routinely captured entire German supply trains and fuel depots completely intact. The American crews, showing typical resourcefulness, immediately utilized the enemy's own fuel, trucks, and rations to sustain their aggressive drive, turning the Reich's remaining resources against its own defenders. The success of this high-speed doctrine rested on individual soldiers who embraced the aggressive rhythm of the advance. They knew that stopping meant giving the enemy time to dig in. A prime example involved Corporal Thomas Vance, a driver with the 11th Armored Division. During a chaotic night movement through heavy fog, his M3 half-track became separated from the main column. Instead of halting, Vance kept driving through the darkness toward the sound of gunfire. Suddenly, his vehicle blundered directly into the rear of a retreating SS horse-drawn artillery convoy. Utilizing the factor of surprise, Vance drove his half-track straight into the panicked convoy, while his gunner cleared the road with a .50 caliber machine gun. Single-handedly, this crew captured over 30 enemy soldiers and cleared a critical bottleneck before their platoon even realized they were missing. When his sergeant later chided him for the risk, Vance simply responded, "The radio said to keep moving, Sarge. I didn't see any reason to wait." General Franz Bayer, commander of the German 8th Army Corps, provided a sobering evaluation of his defeat after the war. He noted that his professional training had prepared him for traditional warfare, but not for the psychological terror of an army that refused to slow down for the night or the terrain. Bayer stated, "We could calculate their numbers and firepower. What we could never calculate was their disregard for operational boundaries. They did not wait to secure positions before launching the next thrust. They accepted risks our doctrine considered reckless, and because they moved so fast, those risks transformed into victories before we could exploit them." The final months of the war proved that American industrial capacity had successfully evolved into an operational philosophy. By turning speed into a weapon, the Third Army systematically dismantled the defensive doctrine of the Third Reich, leaving its elite formations stranded, isolated, and running out of time.